soon. But I just did a trigger video where I did gum chewing and a little bit of a New York accent. I'm doing a cooking voiceover, so lots of good videos that you aren't going to see here on YouTube that are on my Patreon. So the link for that is always down below in the description box. And I want to start mentioning in my videos my lip combo. I want to start mentioning in my videos like